Hello, tipsters. This is Melissa Morgan. I'm the host of Just the Tipsters True Crime Podcast because people are awful and they kill each other. Tipsters, this is Melissa Morgan, the host of Just the Tipsters True Crime Podcast. Have you ever wanted to kill anyone? Hey, tipsters. My name's Melissa Morgan, and I'm the host of Just the Tipsters True Crime Podcast, America's favorite true crime podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcast. I don't know where you can find us. How about that? Just find us and listen, and you'll really like it. Is that okay?
Just the Tipsters with Melissa Morgan is actually available on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe, rate, review. You'll be glad you did.
Welcome to No Better Death mini episode number 4. Today we're going to take a look at the Twilight Zone accident of 1982. 82. So it's not the Rod Serling fronted black and white original series, but rather the movie starring John Lithgow, Vic Morrow, Scatman Carruthers, Dan Aykroyd, and Albert Brooks, narrated by Burgess Meredith. A powerhouse of casting in this flick. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. There's something on the wing! Something! It's basically an anthology of 3 retellings of stories from the original series and 1 new story. Each story had its own director. Steven Spielberg, if you don't know who that is, just go jump off a cliff or step in front of a train. Joe Dante, best known for his work on Gremlins, The Howling, Rock and Roll High School, Piranha, the list goes on. George Miller, you probably know that name from the Mad Max series, and piece of shit John Landis, father of piece of shit Max Landis. And John Landis, of course, did Blues Brothers, Trading Places, An American Werewolf in London, Michael Jackson's Thriller video, and a bunch of other stuff. He's no slouch. And neither are any of the other directors on this flick, but Landis's chunk of the movie is what lands the film here on No Better Death. And with the first season of Jordan Peele's Twilight Zone reboot being out, I think this is a good time to cover the story. So what happened? Why are we talking about the Twilight Zone movie? I'm sure there are those of you listening who remember this, but most of my generation and the ones that came after probably don't know the story. I was 1 month old when this happened, and I didn't know about it until a month or 2 ago. Well, as of the scripting, as of now, it's probably been like 6 months ago, when Jackie Shee on Facebook hit me up and asked me to cover the story sometime. So how did I never hear about this? I like the movie, I'm from the 80s, I love weird and unusual death stories, but somehow this never hit my radar. So I'm guessing quite a few of you out there don't know about it either, but this flick has a body count of 3 on its hands. One being one of the most revered actors of his time, and the other 2 were children. And regular listeners know I try to avoid stories that involve children, but this isn't a murder, and it's in the context of a story with a lesson. And that lesson is, always do the paperwork. Before we get into the story, you might be noticing a little extra sibilance in my voice. That is because about a week ago, one of my front teeth fell out. It sucks so bad. Growing up in Mississippi, the one thing I didn't want was the southern smile, with all the teeth missing. And somehow, despite my best efforts to completely deny my place of origin, it seems I have ended up with hillbilly mouth. I currently have several dental appointments scheduled and am in the process of trying to get my grill fixed, but until I figure out what's going on, every episode's going to have 100% more sibilance because my grill's fucked up. Alright, let's get into it. July 23rd, 1982. The Twilight Zone film featured 4 sequences, one of which was based on a 1961 Twilight Zone episode titled A Quality of Mercy. In the script, a bigoted character named Bill Connor, played by actor Vic Morrow from the TV show Combat and countless others in movies such as Bad News Bears, and also father of Jennifer Jason Leigh, travels back in time to get a taste of his own medicine when he jumps back to the Vietnam War, where he decides to save a couple of Vietnamese children from an American airstrike in an attempt to atone for his bigotry. The children would be played by 6-year-old Renee Shin Yi Chin and 7-year-old Micah Din Lee. Naturally, a film about war is going to have explosions, many of them, so you need somewhere to film that would allow for explosions. The filming location was a ranch called Indian Dunes that was used through the 80s in films and TV shows including The Color Purple, Escape from New York, hell yeah, Snake Plissken, MacGyver, love me some old school MacGyver. That reboot though was a piece of fucking shit. And China Beach was another thing filmed here at Indian Dunes. The location was popular. It was within the 30-mile zone, aka the studio zone, which allowed for the hire of local workers, thus lowering production costs. It's a wide open area, which allowed for more pyrotechnic effects, a must-have when you're shooting a war scene, and it was possible to shoot night scenes without city lights visible in the background, a plus in this instance as there would be night shoots. Additionally, Indian Dunes' 600 acres featured a wide topography, green hills, dry desert, dense woods, jungle-like riverbeds along the Santa Clara River. All of this made it so suitable to do like double locations for around the world, including Afghanistan, Myanmar, Brazil, and in particular for this film, Vietnam. So what happened on the last day of shooting. They just had to get this one scene in the can and it was off to editing. They had the perfect spot to film a nighttime helicopter air raid with lots of Vietnam War style explosions. They had renowned actor Vic Morrow, as I said earlier, playing the main character in the story and 2 kids that looked the part. Well, one was Chinese, but as we all know, white audiences can't tell the difference. They even had a real Vietnam vet, Dorsey Wingo, flying the helicopter. Everything should be to go up to this point, right? Except it wasn't, because John Landis is a piece of shit. You know who's a great director from this era and isn't a piece of shit? Robert Zemeckis. They should have made this a Zemeckis flick, because Zemeckis would have filed the fucking paperwork to legalize these kids being on set, or found a different way to do it that didn't end in 3 people dying. Paperwork, guys. Paperwork. Director John Landis violated California's child labor laws by hiring Micah and Renee without the required permits. Landis and several other staff members were also responsible for a number of labor violations connected with other people involved in the accident, which came to light after the fact. The children were being paid under the table to circumvent California's child labor laws, which did not permit children to work at night. Landis opted not to seek a special waiver, either because he didn't think he'd get the permission for such a late hour, or because he knew he would not get approval to have young children in a scene with a large number of explosives. The casting agents were unaware that the children would be involved in the scene. Associate producer George Falsey Jr. told the children's parents not to tell any firefighters on set that the children were part of the scene, and hid them from a fire safety officer who also worked as a welfare worker. Another fire safety officer was concerned the blast would cause a crash, but didn't tell Landis of his concerns. Vic Morrow's friend and former combat co-star Dick Peabody wrote that Morrow's last words before the accident were, "I've got to be crazy for doing this shot. I should have asked for a double." So no stunt double or anything like that. Vic Morrow is going to do this war scene on his own. So before the scene's even shot, you have how many people responsible? John Landis, producer George Falsey, the kids' parents, and at least one fire safety officer, plus the lead actor who should have voiced his own concerns. Silence is compliance. He was the adult in closest proximity to these children during the shooting of a dangerous scene. If he had the slightest concern for his own life, then he should have been very concerned for the children with whom he shared the scene. It's like being a chaperone on a field trip. If you're the adult closest to the children that aren't yours, they're still your top priority. That's basic social protocol. Even my Aspergery ass understands that. The night scene called for Morrow's character to carry the 2 children across a river while being pursued by US soldiers in a helicopter. The helicopter was piloted, as I said earlier, by Vietnam War vet Dorsey Wingo. Now, during the filming of the scene, Wingo, who was new to the movie business, had been spooked by the pyrotechnics. during rehearsals, which is another way of saying he shouldn't have been the one flying this very real helicopter around very real humans, regardless of how fake the scene was, stationed his helicopter 25 feet from the ground, and while hovering near a large mortar effect, turned the aircraft 180 degrees to the left for the next camera shot. The effect was detonated while the helicopter's tail rotor was still above it. So the explosion, which was supposed to happen to the side of the helicopter, happened right under it, causing the rotor to fail and detach from the tail. A crowd of at least 100 people, including both children's parents, watched helplessly as the low-flying helicopter spun out of control. Morrow dropped Renee into the water. As he was reaching out to grab her, the helicopter fell on top of Morrow and both children. Morrow and Micah were decapitated by the helicopter's main rotor blades, while Renee was crushed to death by the helicopter's right landing skid. According to Stephen Farber and Mark Green's book on the incident, Outrageous Conduct, there was a shocked silence until Renee's mother started shrieking as she kneeled over her daughter's lifeless body. Morrow never got to deliver his scripted line, "I'll keep you safe, kids. I promise. Nothing will hurt you. I swear to God." Kind of an ironic line given what happened, you know? 2 kids, 6 and 7 years old, are dead. 2 kids that were not supposed to be there. 2 children that were there by deception and law-breaking, encouraged by the promise of money to be made, told everything would be fine by rich asshole movie studio execs, directors, and producers, allowed to be there by parents who should have been more vigilant in looking out for their children, killed by a helicopter that was operating far too close to people and piloted by a man who had previously proven he was not suited to be flying under these conditions. All of this aided by fire safety officers who were lax in their duties and pyrotechnics specialists that allowed their handiwork to be set off way too close to a live flying helicopter. Someone out of all this clusterfuck has to go to jail, right? If you kill 3 people, especially 2 kids, you go to jail. Isn't that? If I walked out into the street and shot 2 children, I would be in prison by that night, correct? Of course, over the course of this show, we've been able to say yes a few times. Every now and then we get a tiny bit of satisfaction in seeing responsible parties held accountable, but those few times have been far outweighed by the times the responsible parties were let go with little to no punishment. What do you think happens here? Director John Landis, one of the producers, the film's production manager, the helicopter pilot, and the explosive specialist all appeared in criminal court to face involuntary manslaughter charges during a trial that lasted almost 10 months and included 71 witnesses. The tragedy also gave Landis the negative distinction of becoming the first movie director to ever be charged with a death on set. Even in front of a grand jury, Landis refused to accept responsibility for the accident, insisting that he had planned everything carefully and had no part in the events that occurred. Perhaps it was his attitude toward the deaths of his actors that led to several of Landis' co-workers to testify against him. They fucking should have, like one cameraman who testified that Landis kept ordering the helicopter to fly lower. Although Landis and his crew openly admitted that they'd illegally hired the child actors, they went to trial for the deaths and were never charged with breaking child labor laws. So that, out of all the laws broken here, they weren't even charged for all of them. You know, when one of us, if we were to go to jail, like if you murder somebody during a high-speed chase and blah, 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 you know, whatever, we see it all the time in various cases. You don't just get charged with murder. You get charged with reckless driving and possessing a firearm and failure to stop at a stop. Like, they stack every charge possible. But this bourgeois Hollywood fucker already getting a break before he's even been sentenced or found guilty or not guilty or whatever the outcome's going to be, he's already only there for one charge. They just completely ignore all the other shit. Also, it was stated in court by one Hollywood air coordinator that Landis was cutting corners by hiring an inexperienced movie pilot, especially one that wouldn't talk back to the director. So that's why he hired this guy. He was most likely aware of this. He knew the guy was new, knew he probably wasn't the best choice, but he also knew this guy, eager to get into the movie business and being on his first gig, wouldn't talk back to him. A 7-man, 5-woman jury deliberated 9 days before finding the 36-year-old filmmaker innocent of 5 counts of involuntary manslaughter in connection with the crash. 3 other filmmakers, George Folsey, Dan Allingham, Paul Stewart, and Dorsey Wingo were also acquitted on all accounts. The 15 verdicts were read to a virtually silent courtroom presided over by Superior Court Judge Roger W. Boren. A media circus had gathered a half hour before the verdict was scheduled to be read. Some of the defense team had given the V for victory sign as they entered the courtroom through a crush of reporters, and prosecutor Leah Perwin D'Agostino had conceded that she had butterflies, of course. The 5 defendants were accused of acting with criminal negligence in the deaths of 3 actors who were struck and killed by a Huey UH-1B helicopter during the late-night filming of a mock Vietnam battle scene at Indian Dunes Park. The script had called for Morrow to heroically carry the children across the Santa Clara River away from the pursuing helicopter, but instead, as film crew members and visitors stared in horror, the 3-ton aircraft careened out of the sky after its tail rotor was engulfed by the blazing fireball of a special effects explosive. The defense pinned the blame on a special effects crew member who ignited the fatal explosives without looking up at the helicopter. Landis, Folsey, and Allingham had admitted long before the trial that they illegally hired the children without a needed state permit. However, the district attorney's office did not charge them with that crime. By the time jurors finally began their deliberations, they had heard 93 days of testimony, followed by 4 days of prosecution rebuttal and 13 days of final arguments. In 71 days of prosecution testimony, D'Agostino called 71 witnesses ranging from the parents of the dead children to expert helicopter pilots and actor-director Jackie Cooper. These jurors watched the footage. They were taken to a movie theater and shown the original footage of the accident. They watched these kids and Vic Morrow be decapitated and crushed on the big screen and still somehow returned a not guilty verdict. The ball of justice was dropped in a major way here. Not only did the entirety of Hollywood and the parents let those kids down, let Vic Morrow down, the jury and the court did it again post-mortem. Landis was held accountable in several civil lawsuits brought by the children's parents and by the family of Vic Morrow. The company that made the helicopter, producer Steven Spielberg, and the Warner Brothers studio were all named in the lawsuits as well. John Landis' career eventually suffered because of the accident. Although he continued to work after the tragedy, creating hits like Three Amigos, Michael Jackson's Thriller video, and Coming to America. Yeah, he really suffered, right? Making classic films and videos we all remember. Really sounds like he's suffering. You know how sometimes you get into trouble at work so they make you do shit jobs like directing a Michael Jackson video? Fuck this guy. His career as a movie director slowly dissolved once the trial ended several years later. When the trial ended, John Landis didn't do many interviews and he seemingly tried to stay out of the public's eye. Very rarely would he even talk about the incident. However, in what he has said, it's obvious that he believes himself to be completely innocent. When pleading not guilty in court, he commented, "I know in my head and I know in my heart that we did not cause the accident." He has also stated during interviews, "What people tend to forget in all this is the helicopter crashed less than a foot from where I stood. It's not like I was removed from this somehow." Oh, you were present at an accident you fucking caused, and you want to somehow try to play a victim by association? You were in the area where some shit happened. You know what? If you were 2 miles from the towers when 9/11 went down, you didn't get to say, "Oh, I was right there." You don't, man. It's not the same fucking thing. Oh my god, the story's pissing me off so bad. Steven Spielberg served as executive producer of Twilight Zone, and since John Landis' segment was the first to be filmed, he had considered stopping production on the entire movie. He eventually decided to finish the project but was not happy with how John Landis handled the tragedy. Spielberg was upset that Landis refused to take any responsibility and cut all ties and contact between them. Spielberg commented, "No movie is worth dying for. I think people are standing up much more now than ever before to producers and directors who ask too much. If something isn't safe, it's the right and responsibility of every actor or crew member to yell cut." Yeah. Spielberg had plenty of other directors in his pocket he could have gave this gig to. Like I said, Robert Zemeckis. Fuck, they could have had George Lucas direct something. I mean, Fuck John Landis. It's unfortunate that it took the deaths of several people in order for things to change in Hollywood. Because of the tragedy on the set of the Twilight Zone flick, Warner Brothers Vice President John Sylvia created a committee that would specifically monitor safety concerns during film productions. The committee created rules and standards for things like pyrotechnics and aircraft stunts. The Injury and Illness Prevention Program was formed for all Hollywood studios, and representation for all industry guilds and unions were included. Of course, accidents still happen on movie sets, but the rules are updated each time one occurs. Risk managers now check out all locations and sets for potential problems and even read through scripts to catch issues before filming begins. They can't be fired by producers or directors, and that helps crew members and actors feel less intimidated to speak up about safety concerns. And really, out of all this, what's probably the most effective to prevent what happened here is the fact that someone outside with an eye on safety is reading the script. If one of those fire marshals that was on set had read the script, it might have occurred to them, well, it says here there's 2 kids. Where are these 2 kids? We haven't seen them. Where are they? You have 2 kids here at night? Do you have a permit? You're going to have them near the exposed? That's all it would have took, was someone outside the film to read the script and realize there were going to be 2 kids past California labor law hours on an explosive set, and this shit would not have happened. But some like we're seeing here, some sort of good did come out of it. There's people keeping an eye on these sort of things now, and supposedly it's supposed to be a lot safer. John Landis began filming Twilight Zone with a healthy career, having hits like Animal House and the Blues Brothers on his resume. He was in his early 30s and highly in demand as a director. However, some people that have worked with Landis have called him arrogant and said that the director could be extremely reckless and stubborn when he wanted something filmed a certain way. One story claims that he told crew members to climb 30 feet of scaffolding and be blown around by helicopter rotors to fix the lighting while filming Twilight Zone. When they questioned his request, Landis allegedly called them chicken shit. Oh, if he's so brave, he could have climbed up there and do it. I fucking hate toxic masculinity like that when some dude's like, oh, quit being a little bitch. Hey, dude, if it's so easy, get your ass up there and do it. Despite the horrible deaths, the movie was still released in theaters. Since Twilight Zone is composed of 4 segments created by different directors, the entire film didn't have to be changed. However, the scenes featuring the helicopter accident were obviously cut, and any mention of the children were edited out of John Landis' segment. Stars such as Dan Aykroyd, Albert Brooks, and John Lithgow participated in the film, but it wasn't well received by critics, and it made much less money than expected. How much is much less exactly? It made $30 million in 1983 box office dollars, plus video, plus however much the studio makes every time it goes on HBO or Showtime, etc., and now plus streaming. I don't see how this wasn't well received. It made a gajillion dollars. As of today, this movie has made over $100 million in 2019 dollars, and Landis definitely got his cut and still receives royalty checks from it, mailed to his palatial Hollywood estate. And no, you can't blame just John Landis. The kids' parents should shoulder responsibility too. The fire inspector who didn't speak up about his fears of an accident, the helicopter pilot that knew he was spooked by pyrotechnics, and several other people are all to blame. But at the end of the day, it was Landis' set, and everything that happened on it was approved by him. Those kids would most likely still be alive today. 7 years old in 1982, they'd be 43. Probably raising their own kids, working a job, taking vacations, living life the same as the rest of us, but that was taken from them. And that's the story of the Twilight Zone accident. NoBetterDeath.info for all. Man, it always feels so gross after like an especially tragic story for me to be like, well, now that we've talked about 2 kids dying, why don't you go to the website? It feels wrong. NoBetterDeath.info for all info on No Better Death. Whatever you want to know about the show, links to everything are right there on the website. Anything you want to say to your fellow death nerds, stories you want me to cover, ideas for the show, tips for improvement, whatever you got, you can hit me up. Facebook, Twitter, and email are the best way to contact me, and I'm just look for No Better Death at any of those and you'll find me. As always, I implore you to leave an iTunes review and tell your friends about the show. We do have the contest going on. Please don't forget that. Between July 15th and August 15th, leave an iTunes review and you're automatically entered to win some dirt that I personally dug up from BTK's backyard. So pretty cool there. If you're into murderabilia, definitely hit up the iTunes and leave a review. Going to try to record another mini after I finish this one, and I do have episode 26 scripted. Going to try to get to that sometime this week, but you guys know that I suck at sticking to a schedule, so you'll get what you get when you get it, but I am trying to work on getting back into a routine of trying to get something to you at least once a week. I do apologize for the times I disappear for like 2 or 3 months, and I really appreciate you guys coming back whenever I do pop up with another episode. It means a lot to me. Thank you for tuning in once again. I apologize for the sibilance or the weirdness in my voice. I don't enjoy it any more than you do. I am your host, Sick Grayson. Until next time, try not to die.